The air is thick and warm, a heavy blanket woven from salt spray and the crushed fragrance of cedar. It is a moment suspended between the deep indigo night and the tentative, soft gray of the coming dawn. We are not looking at stone monuments or dusty battlefields. Our journey begins in the subtle, rhythmic soundscape of a world defined by water, wood, and the immense, whispering expanse of the sea. Close your eyes, or simply let your gaze soften, and drift into the ancient lands of the Levant, a narrow strip of fertile coast nestled against the colossal, purple-blue heart of the Mediterranean. This is a time long before the Roman legions, before the Greek philosophers etched their thoughts in marble, and even before the great pyramids of Egypt had taken their final, weathered form. This is the moment when a people, known to history as the Phoenicians, began to listen to the sea, not as a threat, but as a path. They were the children of the coast, their backs pressed against the high, cedar-crowned mountains, their faces turned permanently toward the liquid horizon, a gentle welcome to the journey, welcome to this space of deep rest and historical calm. Allow the gentle rise and fall of this narrative to be your anchor. Here we slow down time. We will dwell in the light, the texture, and the quiet sounds of an ancient world built not on conquest, but on the delicate art of connection. Release the day, let your thoughts quiet, and prepare to journey into the purple dawn of trade and seafaring. The scent of cedar and salt, the physical geography of their home was both a blessing and a constraint, a natural cradle that fostered their destiny. Stretching from what is today modern Lebanon and parts of Syria and Israel, the Phoenician homeland, often called Canaan by earlier peoples, was a ribbon of land. To the east, the towering Lebanon mountains rose sharply, their slopes thick with the prized Cedrus libani, the mighty cedar tree. The density of these mountains made large-scale land expansion, agriculture, and military campaigning difficult and impractical. But these same mountains provided the gift that would define them, the finest shipbuilding material in the ancient world. The wood was aromatic, naturally resistant to decay and insects, and held a light yet formidable strength. When a fresh log was cut, the air around the woodcutters would fill with a pungent, clean, resinous scent, a smell that was the true currency of this region before any coin was struck. Imagine walking through the lower slopes of the cedar groves just after a morning mist has lifted. The ground beneath your sandals is damp, strewn with needles. The only sounds are the rustle of a small breeze through the branches and the distant, muffled chop of an axe echoing through the valleys. The light struggles to penetrate the dense canopy, casting the forest floor in a cool, deep green twilight even at midday. Down on the coast, the land was a patchwork of small, vibrant city-states. Byblos, Sidon. Entire were the names that would soon echo from the Aegean to the Atlantic. Each city was an island of human endeavor, clustered around natural harbors, their existence dictated by the rhythm of the waves. The soil was rich enough for olive groves and grapevines, providing the staples of life, but not vast enough to support a large land-based empire. Survival lay not inland, but outward. The harbour towns at rest let us settle into the ancient city of Sidon. 1,000 years before the Common Era, the city is awake, but the frenetic pace of the market will not truly begin until the sun climbs higher. The harbour is a cradle of tranquility at this hour. The fishing fleet is returning, their small, sturdy boats, built from the very cedars we just described, gliding silently on the near-still water. The air now carries a new, complex layering of smells, the sharp metallic scent of fresh seawater, the underlying musk of drying fish nets, and the warm, yeasty aroma of bread baking in the communal ovens in the city's heart. The fishermen are simple, their clothing practical, undyed linen tunics, perhaps woven with coarse wool in the cooler months. Their movements are practiced and economical as they secure their catch and begin the task of mending the wide, knotted mesh of their nets. The rhythm of this mending is a slow, hypnotic sound, the faint click-clack of bone or wooden needles passing through the tough fibers. Above the harbour, the earliest permanent structures are built from local limestone. Stacked and fitted together without mortar, their surfaces softened by centuries of sea air erosion. They are humble, functional, built to withstand the steady assault of sun and salt. The streets are still damp from a light mist. A few early merchants are beginning to lift the thick, coarse linen awnings over their small stalls. The sounds are hushed, intimate. A dog barking lazily in the distance, the gentle tink of a coppersmith testing a finished bowl, the almost imperceptible murmur of the tide against the sea walls. This is the quiet foundation of a great civilization, a deep breath taken before the world's commercial engine starts to turn. The language of trade, one of the most profound, yet quiet, gifts of the Phoenician world, was already forming in the minds of the merchants who woke in these stone houses. They were traders, negotiators, record-keepers. Their interactions were complex, requiring a method to track goods, prices, and agreements across vast distances. The cuneiform scripts and hieroglyphs of their powerful neighbors, Babylon and Egypt, were beautiful but cumbersome. They required specialized scribes and years of training. The Phoenician approach, like their ships, was streamlined and efficient. The need for a simple way to write led to the creation of what we call the Phoenician abjad, a nearly form of the alphabet, a system based on sounds rather than symbols representing whole words or complex ideas. Imagine the intellectual quietude required for this profound simplification. The scribe, sitting in the soft shade of an olive tree, not struggling to memorize thousands of characters, but simply analyzing the sounds of human speech. Aleph for the sound of the breath starting, Bet for the enclosure of the lips. 22 simple, elegant forms, each one a breath, a sound, a building block. The invention was not born of high philosophy, but of the deeply practical need to write down. 10 jars of olive oil sent to Byblos, payment due upon delivery. It was a tool of commerce, and that practicality allowed it to travel. Every time a Phoenician ship docked in a foreign port, the crew brought not only cedar and glass, but also the seeds of literacy, the silent script that would one day become the basis for Greek, Latin, and ultimately, our own way of writing, the subtle art of shipcrafting. The great trading vessels, the Gaulois, are the true heroes of this story. They were the vehicles of their ambition. In their construction demanded patience, engineering acumen, and immense physical effort. In the quiet, sheltered coves away from the main harbor, the shipyards are beginning to toster. The smell here is overwhelming, pine pitch and tar, mixed with the clean, sharp scent of newly planed cedar and the fainter, sweet smell of sea-soaked brine in Theolder wood. The shipbuilders are artists of compromise, designing a hull that is wide and deep enough to carry a massive payload, jars of wine, bales of cloth, precious metals, yet still sleek enough to cut through the unpredictable Mediterranean chop. Unlike their narrow, fast warships, the merchant vessel was built for stability and capacity. The sound of the shipyard is its own distinct melody. It is the steady thunk of mallets driving wooden pegs, tree nails, into pre-drilled holes, the high, rhythmic screech of a large saw biting through a thick plank, and the low, collective grunts of men moving a massive timber beam into place. None of these sounds are frantic. They are all deliberate, spaced by the need for precision. The planks are fastened using the durable pegged mortise and tenon technique, a method of joining wood that gives the hull an astonishing monolithic strength. The shippy is not simply a shell of wood. It is a single integrated structure, capable of withstanding the grinding pressure of long voyages and the sudden violent shifts of a storm. Imagine running your hand over the finished cedar hull. It is smooth, slightly warm from the sun, but also rough in places where the pitch has dried. This vessel is not merely an object. It is the physical manifestation of Phoenician courage, designed to transform the terrifying void of the ocean into a highway of prosperity. Without this ship, there is no story. The quiet preparation for voyage as. The sun begins to truly warm the stones of the city. The preparations for a major outbound voyage are now underway. The ship we just saw being built is nearing completion, and the next great journey, perhaps heading west towards Cyprus, or even farther, is being organized in the cool shadow of the docks. The primary cargo for the initial legs of the journey often starts with the very things the Phoenicians had in abundance: aromatic cedar and pine products, prized glassware, and critically, their unique and defining commodity, the Tyrian purple dye. Let us dwell on the purple. It is the color of the empire, a hue that defined kings, emperors, and power for thousands of years. It was not derived from plants, but from a tiny, unassuming sea creature, the murex snail. The processing site, usually located downwind from the main city because of the intense, unpleasant smell, is a scene of quiet, yet intense, labor. The smell here is unlike anything else, a heavy, metallic, slightly acrid stink that permeates the very sand and stone. It is the odor of decay and chemical transformation, the necessary price for this most luxurious of colors. The snails are harvested from the rocky sea floor, then meticulously crushed to extract a tiny gland. This gland contains a milky, colorless fluid that, when exposed to air and sunlight, undergoes a miraculous photochemical change. It slowly shifts from yellow-green to a rich, deep violet or crimson purple. It takes thousands of these small snails to produce just a single gram of the true Tyrian purple. This sheer scarcity, this intense labor, is what gives the color its immense value. The finished product, the powdered pigment or the dyed thread, is a color so saturated, so stable, that it seems to absorb the light around it. It is deep, solemn, and impossibly rich. A merchant who handles this finished product knows he holds concentrated wealth. The wool, spun from the highest quality sheep, is carefully checked for consistency. It is packed not in large crates, but in small, protected boxes, sometimes lined, with cedar shavings to keep insects away and to add a counterpoint to the dye's lingering scent. The final thump of these valuable parcels landing in the cool, dark hold of the ship is the sound of capital moving, the promise of immense return from the distant markets. The looming horizons, as the sun climbs toward its zenith, casting the Mediterranean in a blinding sheet of cerulean blue. The captain of the outbound vessel consults his aides. Navigation for the Phoenicians was not based on complex instruments, but on an intimate, inherited understanding of the heavens and the currents. They were the first great people to trust the cynosure, Ursa Minor, the Little Bear, as Mahler, less bright constellation that points unerringly to the North Star. The Greeks, by contrast, relied on the larger, more recognizable Great Bear. This small difference highlights the Phoenician daring. They were willing to venture farther from shore, where the reliable sight of land-based landmarks disappeared. They relied on the subtler guidance of the stars, the quiet wisdom of the night sky. Tonight, the stars will guide them, but first, the day's tasks must be completed. Fresh water is being brought aboard in large, sealed clay jars. Bags of dried figs, lentils, and hard biscuits are stowed away for the long-duration diet of the crew. The 20 or so men who will crew this ship are not warriors, but practical seamen, expert navigators, knot tiers, sail menders, and porters. Their conversations are low, focused on the technicalities of the journey, the expected wind patterns, the depth of the water near known sandbars, the best spots to put in for fresh provisions along the way. The sail itself, made of heavy woven canvas, is folded neatly, waiting. It is sometimes dyed a simple red or a reddish-brown with natural ochre, not just for aesthetics, but also as a form of preservative against the sea air. When this immense sheet of cloth unfurls, it will catch the wind and become the engine of their voyage, carrying the scents of cedar and purple across the vast, empty water. For now, the anchor chain is still settled deep in the mud of the harbour floor. The sun is no high, the heat is palpable, and the city enters the quiet lull of the hottest part of the day. Let the warm air settle around you. Imagine the heavy scent of the cedar, the distant tang of the sea, the simple, practical beauty of the vessel waiting patiently in the harbour. We have established the quiet, practical genius of this coastal people. Their ships, their dye, their script. This is the world before the journey begins. It is the calm before the great, slow expansion that will define the rest of our narrative. The city sleeps now. Only the rhythmic sound of the lapping water against the hull of the trading vessel remains. A slow, steady slosh, slosh, slosh. The silent promise of journeys yet to come. Motion. The midday heat of Sidon has finally begun to recede, yielding to the long, slow cooling of the late afternoon. The harbour, which lay still and inert under the harsh glare of noon, now stirs with renewed purpose. A faint, westerly breeze, the welcome melanos that promised good sailing conditions, begins to ripple the surface of the water, disturbing the perfect reflection of the ancient city walls. This gentle wind is the catalyst. It is the sign that the moment of departure has arrived. The decision to sail is rarely taken lightly. It involves complex calculations of weather, time, and the immense, irreversible commitment of leaving the known world for the vast, unpredictable ocean. The Phoenicians did not simply set sail. They launched themselves into a state of intense, sustained engagement with the elements. The slow farewell, the harbor scene transforms. The previously quiet crew now works with coordinated, unhurried energy. The captain, a man whose skin is tanned dark and etched with thin lines of sun and salt, stands by the stern, his gaze fixed on the distance. He wears a simple belted wool tunic, perhaps dyed a deep, earthy red from ochre, a color that contrasts subtly with the pristine, pale linen of the higher officials who have come to see the cargo off. The sound of the anchor being raised is a slow, grinding, heavy sound, a metallic scrape clank as the iron fluke is dragged free from the muddy silt of the harbor bottom. Every link of the chain being hauled in is a moment of severance from the safety of the port. The farewells are restrained, marked by a deep understanding of the risk involved. A simple nod between a sailor and his family on the dock, a small earthenware flask of wine exchanged as a final token. No shouting, no grand pronouncements, just the quiet acknowledgement that they are departing on a journey that might last 6 months, perhaps a year, and that the sea offers no guarantees. The Gaulois, our sturdy merchant ship, is pushed slowly away from the stone quay using long, heavy poles. The men grunt, their muscles straining, guiding the heavy hull into the open channel. The water swirls darkly under the immense pressure of the displaced wood. The unfurling of the sail. Once clear of the immediate moorings, the true work begins, raising the immense square mainsail. This is the moment the ship ceases to be merely a floating structure and becomes a dynamic machine powered by the air. The crew moves in synchronized, rhythmic action. The ropes, thick and hempen, groan under the tension. The command is given in a low, chant-like tone, ensuring that the pull is even and sustained. Heave and hold, heave and hold. As the heavy canvas unfurls, the wind immediately bites into it. A deep, powerful snape shows across the water as the sail fills fully. The ship, which moments before was sluggish, suddenly leans slightly into the breeze. The movement is smooth, steady, and inevitable. The Gaulois is alive. The scent of pine pitch and the dry, preserved canvas dominates the air. The faint sound of the water begins, no longer the gentle slosh of the harbor, but the new, sharper sound of the hull slicing through the waves, a sustained hiss and gurgle along the waterline. The ship is now heading out into the open sea, away from the sheltering arms of the harbor walls. The buildings of Sidon begin to shrink, their details blurring into a soft ochre band against the backdrop of the towering green mountains. The first night at sea, the journey west begins in earnest, sailing with the prevailing currents and the wind following the familiar coastal route before daring to cut across open water. As the sun dips dramatically toward the horizon, staining the clouds in deep violets, crimsons and golds, colors that mirror their precious dye, the crew settles into the routine of the long voyage. The light disappears rapidly in the Mediterranean. Suddenly, the world is reduced to the small, wooden microcosm of the ship, surrounded by the immense, star-strewn bowl of the sky and the cold, invisible bulk of the sea. The watch is set. 2 men stand by the rudder, the steering oar, feeling the small, constant vibrations of the ship and the subtle pressures of the currents. Their conversation is hushed, simple, focused on the compass and the stars. The rest of the crew settles down in the protected area of the deck, away from the damp spray of the bow. They share a simple meal of dried fish and hard bread, the chewing sounds slow and deliberate in the quiet dark. This is the quiet discipline of the ancient mariner, conserving energy, finding rest whenever possible, trusting the materials of the vessel, and trusting the wisdom of the navigator who keeps the cynosure, the tiny star constellation, just visible above Therim of the north. The entire narrative of their journey, Their survival is written in that pinprick of northern light. The only continuous, unchanging sound of the night is the water. The sea is never truly silent. It breathes. A deep, sustained, hypnotic rush of water along the hull, punctuated by the occasional louder slap of a wave against the bow. This sound is the ultimate lullaby of the ancient world. The geography of opportunity, as the days turn into a week and the ship sails west, let us trace the geography that necessitates and enables this vast trade network, the very foundation of the Purple Empire. The Phoenician homeland, as we established, was constrained. The great empires, Egypt, Assyria, the Hittites, were all focused on land-based control, on farming and conquering neighboring kingdoms with chariots and foot soldiers. Their focus was inward, toward the fertile river valleys and plains. The Phoenicians realized their great strategic advantage was the vacuum of the sea. No major empire claimed the entire Mediterranean. It was a contested, dangerous, but ultimately open space. Their scarcity of land resources, metals, tin, and other crucial commodities forced them to seek these goods elsewhere. This need to find trade partners became the true catalyst for their expansion. They didn't seek to conquer, they sought to exchange. The early voyages were modest, hugging the coastline of Cyprus, then Crete. Cyprus was vital, a source of copper, essential for tool-making and alloying with tin to make bronze. The Phoenician ships would arrive, laden with precious cedar, Tyrian Purple, and the famous Phoenician glass, a technology they perfected. Imagine the sensory experience of this exchange. The Phoenician textiles are soft, aromatic, and dyed in, the deepest, most shocking color the Cypriots have ever seen. In return, they receive heavy, dull, earth-smelling copper ingots, perhaps still warm from the smelting pits. The language of the exchange is a mix of simple hand gestures and the use of the Phoenician script to scratch out numbers and symbols for accounting. The entire transaction is characterized by quiet, mutual respect, the understanding that each side possesses a good the other desperately needs. The lure of distant shores. Metals, as their cities grew wealthier, the demands for raw materials became more insistent. Copper was a start, but the age of bronze required tin, a surprisingly rare element and a key ingredient that was simply not available in the Near East. The search for tin, the catalyst for the next great wave of expansion, pushed the Phoenician ships past the familiar islands of the central Mediterranean and into the dangerous, unknown waters of the West. This was the true moment of transformation, when trading voyages turned into exploratory and ultimately colonizing missions. The farther west they traveled, the more time they spent at sea, the greater the need for safe harbors, places to repair the hull, replenish the stores, and wait out the fierce, unpredictable storms of the autumn and winter. The concept of the trading post or emporion slowly evolved into the concept of the colony, or Carthage, new city. We are sailing now past the southern shores of the large island known as Sicily. The air is still warm, but the sea is rougher here, the wind stronger. The crew is working the ship hard now. The captain shouts instructions, not in anger, but in the need for immediate, critical response. The sound of the wind-whipping therapies is sharp, a high, insistent whine. The spray, cold and heavy, now regularly washes over the bow, soaking the forward deck. They are aiming for a site on the northern coast of Africa, a promontory of land that offers a natural, sheltered bay, a place that will eventually become Utica, one of their earliest and most crucial western strongholds. The founding impulse. Utica, the ships, finally reached the desired harbor after weeks at sea. The relief is palpable, visible in the way the crew's shoulders finally relax as the captain expertly maneuvers the vessel into the sheltered, calm water of the bay. The smell shifts immediately, from the pure, cold scent of the deep sea to the warmer, earthier, and slightly marshy scent of the African coast. The landing is slow, deliberate. The first actions are practical, securing the ship, gathering wood, lighting a signal fire for water boiling, and sending out a small scouting party to assess the immediate environment. The choice of location for Utica, like all their early settlements, was not about land acquisition, but about pure maritime logistics. It needed a defensible harbor, sheltered from the worst storms. Access to fresh water, essential for the crew's survival and long-term viability. Proximity to indigenous trade routes. A place where Phoenician goods could be exchanged for local silver, leather, and eventually access to the deeper western resources like tin. The first building is not a temple or a palace, it is a simple storehouse. Its walls are built of local, rough-hewn stone, and its roof thatched with heavy reeds, all designed to protect the valuable, aromatic cargo. It is a symbol of their intention, not conquest, but permanence in trade. In the coming weeks, the rhythm of this new settlement is slow and deliberate. The sailors transform into carpenters, masons, and negotiators. They clear small patches of land, not for large-scale farming, but for a simple vegetable garden to supplement their stores. They interact cautiously with the local peoples, offering small gifts of glass, beads, and bronze tools, establishing the crucial, non-military relationship that was the Phoenician hallmark. The soundscape here is new. Gone is the distant roar of the busy Sidon market. Instead, there is the continuous shush of the tide, the unfamiliar chirping of the local birds, and the soft, repetitive chunk of men using hammers and chisels to shape the local stone. It is the sound of a seed being planted, quietly and with immense patience, in the soil of a foreign land. This first foothold in the West, this modest storehouse on the African coast, is the moment the purple dawn truly breaks. It is the critical catalyst, transforming a coastal trading people into a sea-spanning commercial civilization. The journey to the end of the Mediterranean, the search for the elusive, essential tin, can now begin in earnest. The small precious packages of Tyrian Purple are about to be exchanged for the metals that will fuel the entire Mediterranean Bronze Age. The ship has launched, the first colony is established. The great, slow journey into the deep western darkness has officially commenced. The sun sets on Utica, painting the new rough walls of the storehouse in the same fiery crimson and deep violet tones that characterize the heart of their wealth. The sea outside the bay whispers its endless, rhythmic promise of distant travel. The soft, rhythmic lapping of waves against the newly built stone quay of Utica serves as the quiet heartbeat of the fledgling Phoenician settlement. The initial frenetic activity of landing and establishing a foothold has subsided, replaced by the steady, unhurried rhythm of daily life in a far-flung trading post. The sun rises each morning, painting the North African sky in hues of rose and ochre, revealing a landscape that is both beautiful and subtly challenging. This is no longer the bustling, established harbor of Sidon or Tyre. Utica is a frontier outpost, a solitary node in a vast, burgeoning network. The air here carries the scent of dry earth, wild herbs, and the unique, sweet-sour smell of the African coast, a scent entirely different from the cedar-infused air of their homeland. The indigenous embrace. The Phoenicians understood that true permanence was not built on military might, but on intelligent, long-term relationships. Their strategy in places like Utica was to integrate, not dominate. The local populations, often semi-nomadic Berber tribes, possessed valuable resources: silver from nearby mines, hides from their livestock, and, increasingly, knowledge of overland trade routes leading to the elusive tin. Initial contact was cautious, marked by wary glances and tentative gestures. Imagine a small group of Phoenician traders, perhaps 3 or 4, walking slowly from the settlement, carrying offerings, a few lengths of finely woven linen, several iridescent glass beads, and a carefully crafted bronze dagger, a clear demonstration of their advanced metallurgy. The soundscape of these early meetings would have been dominated by the wind rustling through the tall, dry grasses, the distant bleating of sheep, and the low, guttural murmur of unfamiliar languages. The Phoenicians, ever adaptable, were quick to pick up key phrases, to understand local customs, and to identify the goods most prized by their new neighbors. The exchange of goods was not just economic, it was cultural. The Phoenicians brought manufactured luxuries and tools, while the locals offered raw materials and invaluable local knowledge. The glimmer of Phoenician glass beads, catching the sunlight, would have seemed magical to people accustomed to natural materials. The smooth sharpage of a bronze axe was a revelation compared to stone tools. The most vital product desired by the Phoenicians was silver, not just for its aesthetic value, but as a practical, portable form of wealth, easier to transport than massive copper ingots and a ready medium of exchange. The indigenous tribes knew where theveins of gleaming ore lay hidden in the hills, and the Phoenicians had the tools and the desire to extract it. Slowly, carefully, a network of trust and mutual benefit began to form. The Phoenician presence, though, initially a single ship and a handful of tents, began to expand its influence not through force but through the gentle, persuasive power of trade. Expanding the network. Sardinia and Gader with Utica established as a crucial waypoint and a base for local trade, the Phoenician gaze began to drift further west. The journey to the very edge of the known Mediterranean, to the mythical source of tin, required more than one distant outpost. It required a chain of them. The next major destination was the large, rugged island of Sardinia. Its strategic location, almost exactly halfway between North Africa and the Spanish coast, made it an indispensable stepping stone. Like Utica, Sardinia offered natural harbors and rich mineral deposits, particularly copper and lead, but also some silver. The journey to Sardinia was longer, more exposed. The ships would sail for days without sight of land, the crew relying entirely on the stars and the captain's deep knowledge of the currents. The sun beat down relentlessly, making the deck planks hot to the touch. The only relief came from the occasional sea breeze, which, while providing propulsion, also brought with it the dry, chafing sensation of constant salt spray. The routine on board was unbroken: constant vigilance, the rhythmic creak of the hull, the flap of the sail, and the quiet murmurs of the crew. They would gather in the evenings to share stories, to repair torn sails, or simply to gaze at the spectacular, undimmed spread of the Milky Way, a vast, shimmering river of stars that seemed to arc directly over their lonely vessel. Upon reaching Sardinia, the pattern was repeated. Identify a defensible harbor, establish a small trading post, and begin the careful process of engaging with the local Nuragic people, known for their unique stone towers. The Phoenician sites on Sardinia, such as Nora and Sulcis, became conduits for the island's metals. But the ultimate goal lay further west, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, the Strait of Gibraltar, into the vast, terrifying expanse of the Atlantic Ocean. This was the edge of the known world, a place shrouded in myth and fear. Yet the promise of tin, found in abundance in far-off lands, was too great to ignore. The founding of Gadir, modern Cadiz, on the southern coast of Spain, just outside the Strait of Gibraltar, was a monumental undertaking. It was perhaps the most daring and geographically significant of all Phoenician foundations. The journey to Gadir was epic, pushing the limits of their shipbuilding and navigation technology. The sea currents through the strait are famously strong and unpredictable. Passing through required exceptional skill and a favorable wind. Imagine the awe and perhaps a touch of fear as the small Phoenician ships passed between the towering cliffs, the mythical pillars. This was not merely a physical crossing. It was a psychological one, stepping from the relatively known enclosed sea into the infinite roaring ocean. Gadir itself was chosen for its unparalleled harbor, a naturally protected bay that offered deep water and easy access to the rich mineral deposits of Tartessos in inland Spain. Silver, copper, and crucially, tin. It was here, at the very edge of the European continent, that the Phoenicians truly anchored their purple thread, the rhythm of the Emporian life. In these new Western Emporia, trading posts was different from the ancient cities of the Levant. They were primarily mercantile, focused on storage, exchange, and the maintenance of the ships that connected them to the homeland. The daily rhythm revolved around the arrival and departure of vessels. The sound of a ship's horn echoing across the water would signal news from home, new goods, and a fresh rotation of crew. This sound, a long, mournful blare, would bring the entire settlement to life. The unloading process was a coordinated dance. Heavy amphorae of wine and olive oil, bales of woven linen, intricate bronze tools, and small precious boxes of Tyrian Purple would be carefully offloaded. In return, the ships would be reladen with raw silver ingots, bundles of tin, and other local commodities collected from the hinterland. The air in the storehouses was a complex blend of scents: dry wood, dust, the faint aroma of olive oil, the metallic tang of unworked ore, and the lingering, sweet yet acrid scent of purple dye. The light inside was always dim, softened by the thick stone walls, creating long dancing shadows from the small oil lamps. The people living in these outposts were hardy, self-reliant. They learned to speak locale dialects, to understand local politics, and to survive far from the immediate support of their home cities. They were pioneers, pushing the boundaries of human connection not with armies, but with diplomacy and the sheer power of desirable goods. The watchtowers, simple stone structures built overlooking the harbour and the sea approaches, were constantly manned, not necessarily against attack, but against the unpredictable fury of the weather, and to spot arriving ships from immense distances. The lone watchman, wrapped in a heavy cloak against the evening chill, would scan the horizon, his silhouette stark against the vast, empty sea, the invisible threads of connection, this slow, deliberate expansion, from Sidon to Utica, from Utica to Sardinia, and finally to Gadir, was not a sudden burst of activity. It was a centuries-long process, a gradual unfurling, like the steady unspooling of a thread across a vast loom. Each new trading post was another knot, another anchor point, binding the disparate cultures of the Mediterranean into a single, interconnected web. The Phoenicians became the primary agents of globalization in the ancient world. They didn't impose their culture by force. They offered it by exchange. Their influence was subtle, yet profound. They carried not just goods, but also ideas, technologies, and most importantly, their remarkable phonetic alphabet. Imagine the quiet transfer of knowledge as a Phoenician merchant. Perhaps in Gadir, slowly teaches a local chieftain the simple marks that represent sounds, allowing them to record inventories or agreements in a way never before possible. The scratching of a stylus on a wax tablet, or a finger tracing shapes in the sand, would be the silent birth of literacy in a new land. The impact of these exchanges was not always immediately visible. It was like the slow, deep currents of the ocean itself, moving vast quantities of water and sediment, transforming the seabed over millennia. Over generations, the local peoples adopted Phoenician pottery styles, absorbed Phoenician words into their languages, and even began to emulate some Phoenician religious practices. The aroma of freshly baked bread in Gadir might now carry a faint hint of the spices brought from the east. The textiles, worn by the locals, might occasionally feature a single, precious thread of Tyrian Purple. These were the invisible, sensory threads that bound the Purple Empire together, not through military subjugation, but through shared taste, shared need, and shared enterprise. As the ships continued to ply their routes, the concept of a Mediterranean Sea shifted. No longer a collection of isolated lakes, it became a single, navigable highway, thanks to the tireless, patient work of these ancient mariners. The purple thread, spun in Tyre and Sidon, now stretched across thousands of miles of ocean, anchoring itself in distant, mineral-rich lands. The sun begins its slow descent over the western edge of the world, beyond the Pillars of Hercules, bathing the ancient settlement of Gadir in a deep, purple-golden glow. The wind whispers through the rigging of the anchored ships, a soft, sustained sigh, carrying the scent of salt and dry earth. The journey continues, always westward, always seeking, always connecting. With the anchor points established, from Utica in North Africa to Gadir on the Atlantic fringe, the Phoenician maritime network enters its most established and prosperous phase. The focus shifts from the dramatic act of founding colonies to the deep, complex and unceasing mechanics of maintaining them. This is the era of the return voyage, where the flow of wealth back toward the mother cities of Tyre and Sidon transforms the entire Levant into a glittering hub of international trade. We rejoin a returning Gaulois vessel, sailing eastward along the North African coast. having spent months collecting precious cargo from the western settlements. The ship is heavy now, riding low in the water, carrying the tangible wealth of the world. Vast quantities of silver and tin, exotic hides, and perhaps a small number of spices and goods collected from trans-Saharan routes. The heaviness of wealth? The atmosphere aboard a fully laden ship is distinct. The rhythmic creak of the hull is deeper, more strained, a constant audible reminder of the enormous weight it carries. The air in the cargo hold, though dry, is thick with the metallic scent of raw silver ore, the dull, earthy smell of the tin ingots, and the musky aroma of cured animal skins. The crew's job is not merely to sail, but to preserve. The captain is constantly mindful of the trim of the ship, ensuring the weight is distributed perfectly to maintain stability in the swell. The sailors check the bilge constantly, listening for the telltale gurgle of water leaking through the planking. The sound of the small wooden pump being worked is a regular, steady squeak hiss, a necessary, mechanical background noise of a profitable voyage. The most valuable cargo is often the easiest to steal and the most vulnerable. The silver from the Spanish mines, the rich, gleaming white metal, is packed in small, heavy chests or molded into easily traceable bar shapes. The tin, essential for the continuing Bronze Age economy, comes in various forms, sometimes as small, dull grey bars, carefully counted and recorded. A merchant on board, accompanying his investment, would spend hours in the small, flickering light of a lamp, meticulously checking the tally marks and bills of lading. His tools are simple, a wax tablet, a bronze stylus, and his own sharp memory. The record-keeping is critical, linking the raw material collected in the far west to the ultimate buyer in the east. This paper trail, managed through the simple clarity of the Phoenician alphabet, is the true engine of their vast wealth. The port of Tyre, apex of the network, the ultimate destination for the bulk of this western wealth, is the island city of Tyre. Unlike Sidon, which sat partially on the mainland, Tyre was built largely on a fortified offshore island, making it virtually impregnable to land-based armies. This physical safety was the necessary foundation for its economic supremacy. As the returning ship approaches Tyre, the sight is one of stunning complexity and activity. The city rises from the sea, its limestone walls bleached white and dazzling under the intense sun, crowned by multi-storied buildings and small, stepped temples. Tyre had two famous harbours, the northern Sidonian harbour, protected from the prevailing winds, and the southern Egyptian harbour. Both are absolutely choked with vessels from every corner of the known world. Long, low Egyptian boats carrying grain and papyrus. Sleek, armed war galleys belonging to the city's defence, and the sturdy, high-sided Gaulois from Phoenicia itself, now unloading their bounty. The sheer volume of sound in the harbour is overwhelming after the quiet monotony of the sea. There is the constant, loud shout of dock foremen, the rhythmic, high-pitched whine of ropes being dragged, the crash and scrape of goods being moved, and the complex, musical polyglot of voices speaking Phoenician, Egyptian, Greek, and various Anatolian and Cypriot dialects, the palace and the purple. The wealth accumulated by this global trade did not stay hidden. It flowed directly into the creation of a stunningly affluent and sophisticated society. The Phoenician merchant class, though practical, demanded luxury, and the silver and tin were transformed not just into practical bronze tools, but into high art. The royal quarter of Tyre, where the kings and chief merchants lived, was a maze of narrow, shadowed, multi-story houses built from high-quality stone, decorated with carved ivories and imported woods. The air in these wealthy districts was thick with the scent of expensive incense, frankincense and myrrh imported from Arabia via the land routes they also controlled, and the rich, musky odor of their signature product. Let us walk into a weaving workshop near the central temple, the very heart of the purple production that funded the global network. The temperature in the workshop is high, kept deliberately warm to aid the chemical processes. The sound here is the patient, complex thwack-thwack swoosh of the loom shuttle being thrown across the warp threads. This is the creation of the highest value product in the ancient world, cloth-dyed double-dipped Tyrian purple. The process is long, requiring immense skill. The fibers, the softest linen or the finest wool, are first soaked in a preparatory solution, then meticulously dipped into the costly vats of murex dye. The cloth is then exposed to the sunlight to deepen the color, then dipped again. It is a slow, iterative, time-consuming process. Imagine touching this finished fabric. It is heavy, dense, and unnervingly soft. The color is not just violet. It is a profound, almost black crimson that holds countless shades within it, changing subtly depending on the angle of the light. It is this color that rulers from Egypt to Babylon paid exorbitant prices for, a tangible symbol of untouchable status. The merchants used the Western silver to fund the harvesting and processing of thousands upon thousands of snails, keeping the supply constrained and the prices stratospherically high. The mechanics of the market dictated that they needed the silver to buy the labor and materials, and in turn, the silver was replenished by the sale of the finished purple textile. It was a perfect, self-sustaining, purple-dyed commercial loop. The innovation of the craft, the Phoenicians were not just traders. They were relentless innovators in manufacturing, constantly seeking to produce goods that would command the highest prices in distant markets. Beyond purple, their second greatest export was glass. Near the industrial districts of Sidon and Tyre, the furnaces glowed with intense, sustained heat. The primary ingredients, sand from the coast and soda ash, were cheap, but the process required specialized knowledge. The sound of the glass workshop is a gentle, intermittent puff hiss of breath into the blowing pipe. The low, powerful roar of the furnace fire, and the delicate, almost musical clink of newly cooled glass objects being carefully lifted from a tray. The Phoenicians perfected techniques for making clear glass, but also for creating small, intricate, polychrome glass vessels, and especially the coveted glass beads. These beads were not simple. They were often inlaid with eyes or abstract patterns, small works of art that traveled thousands of miles. To the indigenous peoples in the far west, these shiny, patterned objects, impervious to decay, seemed almost miraculous, a perfect, compact currency for trade. This balance, bringing raw, heavy metals in and sending small, high-value, light goods out, was the secret to their profitable trade network. The Gaulois ships were built to carry bulk, but the Phoenician genius lay in creating manufactured goods whose value far outweighed their weight. The quiet power of the king. The political structure that oversaw this vast network was centered on the city kings, the Sophetes. The king of Tyre, for example, was less a military commander and more a chief executive, presiding over a council of powerful merchant families. The royal palace was the economic nerve center, a place of quiet meetings, not loud decrees. Imagine a meeting in the cool, shaded courtyard of the palace. The floor is paved with smooth, cool stone, and the only sound is the gentle, continuous splash of Asmol fountain, muffling the distant sounds of the harbor. The focus of their discussion is always logistics, the latest reports from Gadir on the Buy Sea tin harvest, the prices being paid for silver in Egyptian markets, the need for new ships to replace those lost to a winter storm near Crete. Their power was not derived from their army, which was modest, but from their information network. They possessed the most current, accurate, and widespread knowledge of supply, demand, and prices across the entire Mediterranean basin. Their decisions were long-term, patient, and risk-averse. They chose colonization over conquest, negotiation over domination, because the continuous, uninterrupted flow of trade was their lifeblood. A military campaign would disrupt the delicate system. A favorable trade agreement would guarantee prosperity for years. This quiet, powerful focus on commerce over conflict is what allowed the Phoenicians to thrive for centuries, maneuvering peacefully among the shifting military powers of the ancient Near East. While the Assyrians fought the Babylonians and the Yoei Egyptians dealt with rebellions, the Phoenician ships quietly sailed on, delivering the purple thread that dressed the kings of all these warring nations. As the sun begins to set over Tyre, casting long, peaceful shadows across the harbor, the returning Gaulois ship is finally empty, its hull riding high and light in the water once more. The wealth of the West has been delivered, recorded, and transferred to the waiting merchant houses. Tomorrow, the ship will be restocked with new supplies. Tyrian purple, finished glass, wine, and olive oil, and prepared for its next great journey westward. The cycle continues, steady and unchanging, the deep, rhythmic breath of the Purple Empire. The final sound is the gentle, persistent clinking of ropes against the masts in the quiet evening air, the sound of the ocean highway at rest. The Phoenician world, centered initially in the Levant cities, achieved its most enduring and powerful expression not in the homeland, but in its greatest and most ambitious western colony. Carthage, the new city, known to history as Carthage. As the mother cities of Tyre and Sidon began to face increasing pressure from the vast, land-based empires of Assyria and Babylon, the focus of the Purple Empire's power began to shift westward, culminating in the golden age of Carthaginian maritime and commercial dominance. We stand now on the shores of the Gulf of Tunis, perhaps 800 years after the quiet founding of Utica, and over 100 years after the legend of the Tyrian princess Elissa Dido and the dramatic, if mythical, founding of Carthage. The city is no longer a small trading post. It is a thundering metropolis, the unchallenged mistress of the western seas, and the final magnificent flowering of Phoenician genius. The concentric harbour, a marvel of engineering. The true heart of Carthage, the secret to its wealth and power, was its meticulously designed twin harbour complex. This was not a natural bay. It was a deliberate, monumental feat of hydraulic engineering, designed to simultaneously handle massive merchant fleets and a powerful navy, all while maintaining absolute secrecy and security. We approach the harbour from the sea. The first impression is the massive, fortified walls of the port entrance, thick limestone blocks rising directly from the water, allowing only a narrow, defensible channel to pass through. Passing through the entrance, we emerge into the rectangular merchant harbour, Kothon. This basin is vast, capable of holding hundreds of high-sided Gaulois vessels, now often Carthaginian-built and slightly larger than their Tyrian ancestors. The scene here is a symphony of commerce, far busier and more centralized than Tyre. The sound is constant. The splash of oars from smaller barges transferring goods, the grinding sound of massive cargo ropes pulling ships to the quay, the collective grunts of thousands of dock workers, men from Iberia, North Africa, Sicily, and Greece, all speaking different tongues, but united by the universal language of trade. The air is heavy with the smell of exotic woods, grain, wine, and the ever-present, faint, oily scent of the vast fishing fleet that fed the enormous city. From the merchant harbour, through a second, even narrower and heavily guarded channel, we enter the circular naval harbour. This is the secret heart of Carthaginian power, hidden entirely from the gaze of visiting merchants. It is here that the true might of the state lies. The naval harbour is built in the shape of a perfect circle, surrounded by ship sheds capable of housing over 200 war galleys. In the very centre of the circle stands the Admiralty Island, the Thynaterian, a multi-story command tower that allowed the admiral to observe every ship launch and manoeuvre. The silence in the naval harbour is striking compared to the merchant port. Here the sounds are methodical and sparse. The soft clink of weapons being oiled, the repetitive slap, slap, slap of oarsmen practicing their synchronized strokes, in the low, sharp commands of drill sergeants. This controlled quietude is the sound of absolute, organized power, a power that protected the fragile threads of their trade. The sensory wealth of the city beyond the harbours. The city itself was a tapestry of Phoenician sophistication. The massive outer walls, the Triple Line, were among the most formidable fortifications of the ancient world. They protected a vast population, perhaps 700,000 at its peak, making it one of the largest cities on Earth. The residential areas were characterized by tall, six-story houses, insulae, a testament to the efficient use of limited land. Walking through the narrow, cobbled streets, the air is cooled by the height of the buildings, and the light is reduced to shimmering strips on the pavement. The smells are rich and complex, the heavy scent of baking bread, the sharp perfume of citrus from the surrounding fertile plains, the megalia, the earthy aroma of freshly drawn well water, and the subtle, lingering trace of imported Arabian spices being crushed in the preparation of food. Carthaginian life was a fusion of Phoenician tradition, North African materials, and Greek artistic influence. The markets, though bustling, possessed a certain elegance. They were laid out in organized squares, specializing in specific goods. One section for pottery and lamps, another for textiles, and crucially, one for imported slaves. Often specialized craftsmen or educated individuals acquired from distant voyages or conflicts. The high-end market stalls would shimmer with the concentrated wealth of the empire. Massive, ornate silver platters from Spain, intricately carved ivory from African elephants, polished black wood, ebony, and the astonishingly durable purple cloth, often woven with gold thread for the highest officials. The trans-Saharan and Atlantic trade by its zenith, Carthage had secured a virtual monopoly on the crucial western trade routes. Their ships regularly sailed beyond Gadir up the Atlantic coast to trade for tin in Brittany, Gaul, and Cornwall, Britain. These were the tin routes, vast, perilous, and highly secretive journeys that fueled the Mediterranean's need for bronze. Imagine the Gaulois ships, now reinforced and built for the rougher Atlantic chop, sailing into the perpetually misty, cold waters of the far north. The climate, the light, and the feel of the air are entirely different from the warm, predictable Mediterranean. The sound here is the constant, loud thump of the waves against the bow, the high shriek of the wind in the rigging, and the loud, insistent cries of unfamiliar northern seabirds. The crews would bundle themselves in thick, waterproofed wool and leather, a stark contrast to the light linen of the Levant. In return for their finished goods, wine, pottery, jewelry, they received the dull, heavy tin ingots, the foundation of their power, which they then secretly transported back to the Mediterranean, controlling the supply and thus the price across all civilizations. Furthermore, Carthage expanded inland, tapping into the lucrative trans-Saharan trade. Through Berber intermediaries, Carthaginian traders accessed gold dust, ivory, precious stones, and rare animal products from the deep interior of Africa. This convergence of maritime routes, tin, silver, and land routes, gold, ivory, made Carthage an unmatchable wealth magnet. The state of the merchant, the Carthaginian government, was an oligarchy led by the wealthy merchant families, who held power through two annually elected magistrates. The suffetes, a continuation of the kingly title. The emphasis was always on stability and commerce. In the Carthaginian Senate House, the deliberations would be cool, measured, and highly practical. The focus was never on glory, but on the bottom line. Should they invest in a new fleet of war galleys to protect the Sicilian trade lanes? Should they raise the price of imported wine to fund the construction of a new aqueduct? The sound of the Senate was characterized by low, reasoned debate, the gentle shuffling of parchment, and the muted sounds of the city outside. The state was a vast, complex business enterprise, and every political decision was fundamentally an economic one. This golden age represents the pinnacle of Phoenician achievement, a fusion of naval technology, engineering genius, financial stability, and diplomatic mastery. Carthage was the ultimate expression of the coastal traders who chose the sea over the land. Their society was deeply religious, devoted to their ancient Punic deities, especially Baal-Hamon and Tanit, and fiercely protective of the quiet sanctity of their commercial enterprise. As the late afternoon sun illuminates the white stones of the city, the Carthaginian harbors are at their busiest, a humming, massive testament to centuries of patient expansion. Ships are coming and going, goods are flowing, wealth is accumulating. It is the perfect, beautiful, and immensely profitable machine of the Purple Empire operating at full capacity. The sound is the sustained, deep hum of a confident civilization, the gentle, rhythmic pulse of the largest economy in the Western world, assured and powerful, ready to meet any challenge to the purple thread it had so meticulously spun across the seas. The towering, vibrant zenith of Carthage, the apex of the Purple Empire, could not last forever. Like all great human endeavors built on delicate systems, the vast commercial network began to face a challenge it could not solve with trade or diplomacy. The inexorable rise of a new, land-based power with a singular focus on conquest. The clash that followed, the Punic Wars, was not merely a conflict between two states. It was the collision of two opposing philosophies. The Phoenician, Punic philosophy, prized maritime trade, stability, and wealth. The Roman philosophy prioritized military dominance, land acquisition, and state control. The slow unraveling. The Great Wars were brutal and long, but our focus remains on the slow, systemics impact on the purple thread, not the sharp shock of battle. For decades, the steady, rhythmic flow of tin from Britain, silver from Spain, and grain from Sicily was disrupted. The soundscape of the sea, once dominated by the gentle creak of the merchant Gaulois, was increasingly punctuated by the sharp, terrifying thump of war galleys and the mournful cries of ships burning on the water. In Carthage, the mood shifted from quiet confidence to grim determination. Even the merchant families, who had ruled for centuries, were forced to fund massive armies built on foreign mercenaries and the desperate wealth of the city's coffers. The resources that once bought silks and spices now paid for swords and supplies. The final catastrophic moments came not with a swift collapse, but with a slow, agonizing siege. By the middle of the 2nd century BCE, the magnificent city of Carthage was surrounded by Roman legions. The great triple line of walls, once a symbol of impregnability, now became a cage. Imagine the last few days inside the besieged city. The scent of fire and smoke hangs heavy over everything, overwhelming the clean scent of the sea. The sounds of the harbour, once so vibrant with commerce, are replaced by the terrible, rhythmic thud of siege engines and the desperate, mournful clamour of the starving populace, the dust and the silence. The final destruction of Carthage in 146 BCE was an event of cataclysmic scale. The city that took centuries to build was systematically reduced to ash and rubble. The great merchant harbour, the architectural jewel of the empire, was choked with debris. The circular naval base, the symbol of their sea power, was deliberately dismantled, its shipsheds burned. The purple thread, woven so carefully across the Mediterranean, was severed. The central anchor point had been ripped out. In the Levant, the mother cities of Tyre and Sidon survived, but their independence was a shadow. They fell under the sway of various succeeding empires, Seleucids, then Romans. They continued to produce the precious Tyrian Purple, which remained theddy of royalty, but they were no longer the masters of the sea. Their trade was now regulated, taxed, and protected by foreign fleets. They became expert manufacturers, but lost their status as global commercial innovators. The ultimate end of the Purple Empire was not annihilation, but absorption. The Romans, pragmatic as ever, understood the value of the network. They did not destroy the trade itself. They simply took it over, replacing the Punic language of commerce with Latin and the Punic merchant fleet with their own. The purple dye continued to travel, but it now dressed the robes of Roman senators and emperors. The quiet persistence of legacy, yet the legacy of the Phoenician people and their purple thread runs deep beneath the surface of history, persisting long after the last Gaulois ship was burned. Their quiet, patient genius gifted the world three things that endured far longer than any empire built on stone or force. The alphabet. The simple, brilliant phonetic script, refined by the Phoenicians for their ledgers, traveled to the Greeks, then to the Etruscans, and finally to the Romans, becoming the foundation of almost every Western written language. Every time you read a book, sign a name, or trace a letter, you are engaging with the silent, enduring gift of a Phoenician merchant. Global seafaring. The Phoenicians invented the deep-sea trade route, their shipbuilding techniques, their navigation, by the cynosure, the North Star, and their understanding of currents and weather laid the entire invisible infrastructure for future European, Arab, and eventually global trade. They transformed the sea from a barrier into a bridge. The Commercial Republic, their model of government ruled by merchant oligarchs and emphasizing trade over conquest, was an early, powerful example of a commercial republic. The very idea that immense power could be derived from exchange rather than war was a profoundly influential concept, one that would resurface in later eras of history in places like Venice and the Dutch Republic. We look back now at the quiet, small coastal cities of the Levant. They built no pyramids or massive land empires. Their monuments were not static stone, but dynamic, moving things, the wide-hulled ship, the meticulously crafted glass vessel, the tiny murex snail. They were the original architects of connection, the patient pioneers who stitched the ancient world together. The purple thread of their civilization has now dissolved entirely into the water, becoming part of the sea itself. But the water is still moving, still connecting the shores, still carrying the faint, eternal memory of their voyages. The final drift as this long journey concludes. Let us settle into the final stillness. Imagine yourself drifting gently on the calm, evening sea, anchored near the ancient coast of Tyre. The scent of cedar is faint now, carried on a soft, cool breeze. The only sound is the deep, slow rhythm of the water against the hull of a resting ship, a sound that has echoed here for 4,000 years. The work of the day is done. The accounts are settled. The voyage is complete. The stars, the faithful, guides of the Phoenician mariners, are beginning to emerge overhead. The sign ashore once again showing its faint, true light in the north. They promise stability, direction, and rest. Let the images of the sturdy cedar ship, the gleaming silver ingots, and the deep, rich purple dye drift away from your mind now, taking with them any lingering thoughts or worries. You are held safe on the quiet sea, guided by the patient light of history. There is nothing left to do now but to breathe deeply, slowly, and allow the gentle, endless rhythm of the tide to lull you into deep and peaceful rest. Good night.